And away we go. It's the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com. Dan Sharper, Dave Lockren along with you on this Monday morning, getting ready for a 7-game MLB slate. Our podcast is also brought to you in part by Yahoo Sports. Don't forget to check out their daily fantasy offerings each and every day. Dave, I know you had a busy weekend. How the hell are you doing?
I'm good, man. My voice is shot, but it was fun. So it was a good weekend. We're back now, though. It's time to work.
It's time to work. It's time to hydrate. It's time to maybe sleep a little bit more once this podcast is done recording. But we'll get through a 7-game MLB slate. We're going to take our time looking at the pitching. Then we'll talk about some of the top stacks from the day. We will tease out some of the content you'll get from the deep dive, which is what Dave writes Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That gets you a prime look at the pitching and then gives you a cheat sheet for the hitters for the day and gives you top stacks as well. That's behind the paywall. Use the promo code EARLYBIRD to get you in for 50% off your first month at Awesemo.com. I am back off a week's vacation. Time with the family is great. Time with the family can also be absolutely stressful. So I'm glad to be back here doing the podcast and glad to be along with you all on this Monday morning. So let's dive right in. And we talked about this before we started recording. Lucas Giolito, 11-9 on DraftKings. He is facing a team that has a pretty darn good offense when things are going right. That is the Boston Red Sox. He's coming off a bad outing, 3 home runs, 6 earned runs total, had 3 walks, did have 9 strikeouts. So you see some upside there against the Cubs. And now we have him at 11-9 on the road. I will never say, especially for those of you out there MMEing, that somebody is off the slate, but I don't see any way I'm rostering Lucas Giolito in this matchup at 11-9 with what else we have to work with on this slate. Do you see this as a potential upside matchup for Giolito, or is that price tag just too high for you?
I'm not getting there. I tell you that much now. I mean, you think about it. He's been very good this season. I think he's been a little bit lucky too. There are some areas of his game that suggest that, you shouldn't be as good as he's been. And I think, most people would understand when you look at what he's been doing. It's not that quality performance isn't sustainable, because I think it is. I think he's a legitimately good pitcher. But I don't think you're going to continue to see 40 fantasy point performances on the regular, especially not against Boston. So, no, I'm not going there. I'm with you. Honestly, like with Kershaw here at Chase Field, I'm not necessarily sure how much interest I have in Kershaw either. He's fine. He's been very consistent this year, but I feel like he's more of a mid-9K pitcher. I get it. Giolito's super expensive, but Kershaw's kind of at a price that makes it difficult to ever fall in love with him unless it's a really good matchup. And this is just an okay matchup. It's not perfect. The park's not great. I don't know if the roof's going to be open. I honestly would rather, and it sounds silly because he's priced up, but I think I have plenty of interest in John Gray here.
Yep.
I mean, I just really don't have much respect at all for this Giants team. John Gray is capable of striking batters out from both sides of the plate, which is really all I care about. He's going to be inside the most pitcher-friendly park in the league. Again, he's striking righties out at 28%, lefties at 22.5%. But the big thing has been walks with him. But this just isn't a team that walks against lefties. It isn't a team that walks very often. And I think once you look over all of his numbers, overall, John Gray once again has been a little bit unlucky. I hate to say it 2 seasons in a row, but he's a better pitcher than I think what we've seen. And what's his xFIP? His xFIP's got to be in the mid-3s. So I buy into John Gray. He's a little bit more expensive than you'd love, but at the same time, he's got plenty of strikeout upside. He's well over a K per inning guy this season, and he's striking out in total 25.4% of batters faced. It's just a really good matchup, a really good park, and a lot of upside.
Yeah, you're spot on. 3.47 xFIP on the year. That's with an ERA of 5.12. And we can get lost in StatCast and advanced metrics, sabermetrics when doing daily fantasy. But these are the numbers you should care about when everything points in the positive direction for John Gray here. I'm completely on board with you as Gray being sort of that 1A for me, well in ahead of, again, due to price points, of Kershaw and Giolito. I just don't see myself rostering much of the other. Again, for those of you who are starting to MME, those of you who are starting to figure out mass multi-entry or getting to 150 lineups, you may still, the way your roster construction comes together, that might happen. Not the way I build lineups, so I will not even start to hand build with Kershaw or Giolito in this slate. We do have Eduardo Rodriguez in a pretty good spot in Boston against the Chicago White Sox. He's at 8,700. And then you have Zach Greinke. We have Julio Teheran against Chicago. And then it gets a little bit dicey from there. It feels like we're going to have pretty much chalk, to me at least, at first glance, with Gray and Eduardo Rodriguez for Boston. Do you see it similarly, or do you see a name on the cheaper end of the spectrum who might have some upside?
No, I certainly think you're going to see a lot of Eduardo Rodriguez ownership. He seems to be popular every slate. He's been underpriced in most spots. Look at his last few games, 8K, 84, 8, 75, 72, which definitely plays into ownership. But 87 against the White Sox is not crazy. This is another baseball team that is okay. Like the White Sox against lefties have been mediocre, but they're not really going to concern you all that much either. And you're looking for strikeout upside in these spots. They strike out, 22.3% of the time, which is lower than most people would expect on their active roster. But they also rank, outside of the top 10 in WOBA and WRC+. Their 145 ISO against lefties, by the way, is fifth lowest in the league. So I don't think you have to worry too much about them not being, a top 10 strikeout team. There are plenty of strikeouts in this lineup. Erod can get to them. It's at Fenway, which is a righty-friendly park, but I'm not worried about it, especially given that he's actually done a decent enough job at home of limiting power. He's allowed 10 of his 13 home runs have come on the road this season, which is kind of encouraging against a White Sox team that has some power, but isn't really going to scare you either. Of the guys that are, let's say, 8K and up, you've got Julio Teheran in Chicago. I don't know what the wind's going to look like. Greinke against the Dodgers. Greinke's a very good pitcher, but, man, it's his upside's been severely limited. And even though he's really, really cheap here, maybe you can make an argument just based on price. But of the 8K and up guys that we've discussed, I think you've got to say that Gray and Rodriguez are the 1 and 2s right now above that 8K range.
Yep, right there with you on that. 7-game slate, fairly cut and dry top end to me, and the price points of 9,800 and 8,700 aren't too that far gone for the two of them to see it as tough to get them rostered. Haven't looked at a ton of bat prices as of yet. We'll do that in a little while when we talk about how the stacks come together. But you do have John Lester against Atlanta. That's in Chicago. Dave already made mention. Don't know what the weather and the wind will be doing there. Former Cubs pitcher Jake Arrieta is facing the Mets, who are a train wreck of a franchise right now. Don't know if you saw it, Dave, the head coach, the manager, Mickey Callaway and Jason Vargas yelling at a reporter during the post game. Can't
be any worse than the Phillies. They just got swept by the Marlins.
That is fair. At least that's happening on the field.
What a joke of a team they are.
And not in the clubhouse. But nonetheless, you do have.
By the way, winds blowing out to right center field, more so center, right center, 16 miles per hour. So there you have it. This one will be. You'll be seeing some ownership here on hitting.
Do we have a line yet, or is that being held till tomorrow?
We're not going to get one of them yet. Just on the win.
So let's continue here. We do have probably going to see a lot of Kyle Schwarber ownership, but Arrieta against the Mets, CC Sabathia against the Toronto Blue Jays. That's in Yankee Stadium. Adam Plutko against the Royals at 6,900. Steven Matz is at 6,700. Pomerantz, Keller, and Aaron Sanchez round us out. Sanchez is down to 4,500. No, it's against the Yankees, but that is a very, very cheap price point. Do any of these names pique interest? I assume Matz and Pomerantz are at least going to be part of the equation early on here, at least part of the player pool because of matchup Don't know about Park for Matz, but the way the Phillies have been playing, as you stated, and Pomerantz clearly in San Francisco against a Colorado team that struggles away from home. I know there's Arenado. I know there's Story, but there's tons of home run suppression there in San Francisco. So Pomerantz may have a tiny bit of upside at 6,300. Who do you like beyond the top end of the pool?
So, not a lot. I mean, well, okay, we'll start. We already talked about the 8K guys. You're not playing either guy at Wrigley Field, so Lester, Julio, Teheran, forget about that. Jake Arrieta has been, I don't want to say he's been terrible, but from a fantasy standpoint, Arrieta hasn't really given us much whatsoever. He's really struggled against lefties. You're going to get a decent amount of lefties in the lineup here, which means that I just can't find any way to even feign interest in rostering him here. I mean, let's see. Against lefties this season, Jake Arrieta is – so he's got a 14% K rate, a 1.7% K minus BB rate, 374 WOBA, 228 ISO, more than 2.25 home runs per nine, a 1.66 WHIP, and a 5.8 xFIP against lefties, 42% hard contact. It's been a really, really rough go for Arrieta against lefties. He's going to face a decent amount of good ones in this lineup today, and I just don't see myself being able to get there at all. I rostered Sabathia last time out, but I also had plenty of Snell, so it was a complete waste of a low-owned Sabathia with 26 fantasy points. I'm not afraid to go back to him here either. Here's why. I think Matz will be pretty chalky here, and for good reason. I have no issues with it. And, he's all over the place. He had one start against the Phillies this year where he literally didn't get out of the first inning. Got hammered, just destroyed. I think it was like 8 runs or something. And then the second one, he was phenomenal. So, you don't look at 1 or 2 starts. Plus, no McCutchen. Half this team is injured. You've got Bryce and Bruce from the right or left side of the plate. Sure, your righties are Hoskins and Real Muto and Segura, but they've really struggled against lefties this year, at least most of those power bats. No McCutchen in the lineup clearly doesn't help. Kingery's been fantastic. But I think Matz is definitely going to be in play here. I'm not going to totally sleep on Sabathia. He's not a high strikeout guy. We know that, and I'm okay with that. I don't need him to be because I do still think, despite all of the Phillies' struggles, that it's still a spot where they could get into some trouble, right?
Yep.
So if Sabathia ends up being like significantly less popular, then I'd be okay with that. He's got a double-digit swinging strike rate this year. It's really not that bad. And then when you stack it up against other pitchers on this slate, you start to realize quickly that he's not that far off from some of these guys. I mean, Matz has a 9% swinging strike rate this year, which is wholly underwhelming. And while you're going to get some decent numbers from him, like while he will strike righties out at 23%, he's walking them at almost 10% this year. Point being, there are always some glaring red flags with Matz that can make him at least someone to come underweight on if he's going to be 35% owned today.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I think we can talk about losing streaks and we talk about cold streaks for an entire offense. And we also can talk about they break out of them eventually. Like there ends up
Let's
being
hope.
fair. When you have players like Harper and Real Muto and whatever you want to say about
Hoskins.
Bryce Harper. Yeah, Hoskins and there's a lot of power
way
here.
Too many good bats in that lineup to be as bad as they've been.
Exactly right. And this seems like as good a spot as any that if Matz is going to blow up, you have the offense here to take advantage of it. So to Dave's point, and something that Awesemo.com offers is ownership projections. So on a shorter slate, 7 games not being the shortest, obviously, but I think there is some upside here to seeing if Matz is going to be highly owned, if people are riding the recency bias of how bad the Phillies have been, and then turning it around. If I'm reading Fangraphs correctly, I have active roster checked off against lefties. The Blue Jays 25.4% K percentage against lefties. WRC plus under 100 at 93.
Yep.
ISO of 181. Again, to your point, they're okay, but there's upside here for Sabathia. So if you weigh those two things out at similar price points and come to a conclusion that you can get a Sabathia at a much lower price point, much lower ownership, but $400 between them, I think it's a reasonable move. And I also think that stacking the Phillies, if for whatever reason they seem to be low owned here, has a definite upside. You're going to be playing against recency stats. You're going to be playing against cold streaks, and you're going to be playing against the potentiality that they are just a bad baseball team, which I don't think is actually the case. So there is some upside there. I don't like Drew Pomeranz as a pitcher.
Let me say something on Sabathia real
Yep.
quick. The Blue Jays, you just made a couple of good points, though. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're bottom 10. They're 10th lowest weighted on base average against lefties. Their ISO is pretty decent, but I'm all right with that if you're going to give up a solo shot or two. You know what I mean? They have a bottom 10 WRC plus and a top 6 strikeout rate. So all of that all of that lines up pretty nicely for Sabathia here. So yeah, if he gives up a home run or two and 1 or 2 runs, it's not something that I'd be terribly concerned about. Get me some strikeouts. And I think he could give you 7 or 8 Ks here, which would come in huge at pretty much the same price as Matt's and the same price, well, a little bit more than Pomerantz, but you're not paying an egregious price for Sabathia at all.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on Pomerantz before we start talking about some offense here?
What's that?
How do you come down on Pomerantz here on the comparison to Matz and Sabathia and even, I guess, Brad Keller below him? Is there anybody else on this slate that you feel comfortable with, or is it stay with Sabathia?
Yeah, so look, I think Drew Pomerantz at least belongs in the conversation, but this is also a Rockies team that's pretty formidable from the right side. I mean, like with Arenado and Story, these are 2 guys that can really make your life miserable. Will it happen? I don't know. It's a bad park. Outside of Coors, they've really been poor this year. You still have Blackman in the lineup. It's a decent enough team. But outside of Coors, they really, really have struggled. Drew Pomerantz, it's really difficult to predict anything you're going to get from him. But one thing that is relatively predictable is 11 of the 14 home runs he's allowed have come away from Oracle Park. It's not a huge surprise. Like, he's going to give up a lot of fly balls, and Oracle Park is going to save him from that brutality. He's allowing, where is it here? He's getting only 38% ground balls on the season, which is not a very high mark. I think Pomerantz, I think you could do worse here. The reason being this. He's striking lefties out at 24.2%, righties out at 22.8%. At that price, you could they don't have to be good for you to be able to make the argument that they're playable.
I'm right there with you. I have a personal bias towards Drew Pomerantz, so it'll be tough to get.
I think we all do.
Into any lineup, but I think that's right. And we haven't gone through the stacks as of yet, so that will obviously color what pitchers you go to and what you can get to. I think we can do that quickly here. I think we already mentioned the Phillies as an offense that has some potential upside. You do have the Cubs against Julio Teheran at what are their price points at as of right now? What do we got? Schwarber, I assume, will be fairly popular here for the Cubs. Let's see. Schwarb's is 3,900. So a good price point there. What do you got offensive wise? What are the offenses you're most intrigued in going after, and who do you think has the most upside?
So there are some high totals on this slate there, and I think some of them are going to continue to climb. Number one, what do you think? Let's have some fun. Remember, we did this before. It's a short slate, so who do you think has the highest total on this slate?
The highest total on this slate is going to be the Cubs.
Well, the problem with that is we don't have them yet.
Line. Yeah, so right.
But I don't think it will be. There's one that's really, really, really high right now.
The Yankees.
Yep. What do you think it's at?
They're at home against Aaron Sanchez. I'm going to say, well, you're also giving me a leading question here. I'm going to say it's at 5.7.
6.8.
Jesus Christ.
6.8. Right? I never would have guessed that. I just said 5.8, 5.9.
Has Sanchez been that bad?
Yeah, it's he had a couple games where his curveball looked awesome.
Yeah, okay.
and it was getting
Oh,
a
yeah.
ton.
Wow, it's been bad. Okay.
He was missing a ton of bats. I mean, he looked phenomenal. And he is just completely unraveled. It's like, man, you just better hope that you would get another blister or another hangnail so you don't have to pitch. Because I think it's going to be another really rough start for him. Worse if he was left-handed, but dude, it's been, and I'm always willing to play anybody that's cheap enough, but I mean, how at this point can you ever roster Aaron Sanchez? So the highest total is the Yankees at 6.8. Next closest team is Cleveland against Brad Keller.
Okay.
Where do you have them at?
I will say they are at 5.3.
All right, 5.7.
Okay.
Now, here's what's interesting. Maybe this will keep Matt's lower. The Phillies are number 3.
Okay, what are they at? 5.1, 5.3, somewhere in there?
5.3.
Yeah.
That's a pretty high total for the struggles and against a decent enough lefty in Matz.
Yeah, I'm with Vegas. I think Philly has all the upside in the world here. So maybe you're right in that the ownership perspective, you may get.
Yeah, I think Philly will be popular. If that hangs up around above 5,
Yep.
I think Matz will have ownership too, for good reason.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be 80 degrees at Citizens Bank Park. All right. Lucas Giolito against Boston has the 4th highest total. How about that? I don't think you get this right.
What the total is?
Mm-hmm.
4.5.
5.1.
Wow.
Giolito gets no respect from Vegas, huh?
I mean, it's the funny thing. Like, I think DraftKings has totally mispriced him here at 11.9 or whatever it is.
Totally
but I'm surprised it's over 5 as a total.
So let's round out the top 5 here. Keep in mind, it's very likely that the Cubs and Braves will have totals that get into the top 5, right? Just to be clear, we don't have totals yet. We won't until 10 or 11 in the morning. But against Lester and Turan, just with the wind the way it is and the weather, we're going to be up above 5, Dan. So I think I'm pretty confident in that. But for now, we'll go with the ones we have. Who rounds out the top 5? It is the New York Mets against Zach Eflin. Where are they at?
The Mets are at 4.9.
4.8. All right. That's some good guessing. I'd say yeah.
Is it Eflin or is it Arrieta?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's I'm sorry.
All right, just making sure I didn't miss.
Wait, no. I think it's Eflin.
MLB.com.
I think it's Eflin.
Let's double check.
I said Arrieta earlier.
Well, DK and FanDuel both have Arrieta at present. Pulling up MLB.com for Monday.
I got it right here. It's Eflin.
Eflin, according to MLB.com. All right.
I saw him on DraftKings, but I remember reading earlier that it was Eflin. So, Eflin's way too expensive. You might have me considering him at a cheaper price, but not above $9K. That's absurd.
Oh, wow. Any consideration here for the Mets lefty bats? Would you Dom Smith at a cheap price point or
Yeah, he's actually been good against righties, and that's more than this year, right? He's striking them out only, I think, 20% of the time, righties that is, but he only walks them 3%, half a home run per 9, 0.082 ISO. They're very good numbers for Eflin. His xFIP's a little bit higher than his ERA, but he hasn't been terrible. He's got a lot of ground balls, not a lot of hard contact. Lefties, however, 226 ISO and 1.91 home runs per 9 with an xFIP north of 5. So, and a whole lot more hard contact. So lefties against Eflin definitely makes sense. I generally don't think he's the best guy to stack against because he has done a really good job of just not getting blown up. But say you get some cheaper bats, you're like, where are our bats at? McNeil, Conforto. So they're not, like you said, Smith not expensive, but some of them are definitely up there in price, which I think will probably bring ownership down quite a bit on these guys. I don't mind the lefty bats. And if you wanted to mix in Pete Alonso, of course, that always makes sense.
All right. Any other offenses? We went through the totals. Any other offenses that you want to touch on before we close out the podcast?
I mean, I love the Yankees here.
Right. Hard not to.
I think Keller always gets bad lines against him. and I don't think he's nearly as bad as he's made out to be. I know his last start was brutal, but all in all, Brad Keller has not been terrible. He's been an average starter, a sub-average or subpar fantasy starter, but that's not what we're talking about here. So not entirely buying into it. It is in Cleveland, though, and I think the big thing here is when you're looking at some of these Cleveland bats, what type of pricing are you going to get on them? Luplo and Mercado are now – their prices are way up. Like, Mercado is more expensive on DraftKings than Francisco Lindor, which is pretty intense. Ramirez is still below 4K. Kipnis is reasonable. So, I mean, look, they're not as cheap as they once were, and I do think it's fine. But the big thing about him, Dan, Brad Keller, going back to last year, doesn't allow power. Like, 6 home runs in 97 innings pitched this year. He just doesn't allow a lot of power. So I don't love that. I obviously like the Cubs against Julio Teheran here. You mentioned Schwarber. I like the lefties, but I'll take anyone with the wind. And then against John Lester, look, he's been fine this year, but there are so many good righties in this Atlanta lineup. Like, there are just so many good righties that if you give me Austin Riley, if you give me Acuna Jr., if you give me Donaldson even, or Dansby Swanson, who's really been better lately. The big thing about this is look at some of the pricing. Yes, Freddie Freeman's expensive. Riley's expensive, but Acuna's cheaper than he's been. Swanson's at $4,300. Donaldson's at $4,300. If Camargo happens to get himself into the lineup against the lefty, actually he hasn't played in a while. No, yes he has. But he hasn't started, I don't think, in a little while. He actually hits lefties really well. If he's in the lineup, he's super cheap. Albies hits lefties way better than righties.
Yep.
I think great play here. And Flowers should be in the lineup. I really like them here, and I don't think you're overpaying at all. Obviously, Freddie Freeman, lefty, doesn't bother me at all. And then you had mentioned this, and I think you're right. The Phillies against Mats, but also I do really want to see what ownership looks like there before, coming in heavy on either side, because I'd be surprised if the Phillies weren't. Well, you know what? Let's do this, and then I'll get your top stacks before we leave. Let's see. I want to know how expensive the Philly bats are. Wow, dude. Real Muto, 3,900.
Right.
Hoskins, 45. Caesar, 37. Kingery, 48. Segura, 39.
Hell, Bryce is 45, and I know I get it.
He's crushed lefties oddly enough this year.
Yep.
But those prices, and then if Roman Quinn's in the lineup, batting somewhere not at the bottom, I'll tell you what. Right now, if I had to guess, without looking at Yankee bats pricing, it looks like the pricing is pretty decent. I still think the Phillies, if that run total sits up there around 5.3, I think they will still have. I think they'll be the highest or second highest owned stack collectively.
Who do you think? All right, so we have 5 Yankees above 5K on this slate. Can you name them?
Say it, 5 Yankees above 5K or below?
Correct. Above 5K.
Okay.
Can you name them? And then we'll close it up.
Mm-hmm. Judge.
That's one.
Voit.
That is an incorrect. He's at 4,800.
Encarnacion.
Correct.
Sanchez.
That is correct. You have 2 more to go.
Well, it's weird, so I'm going to have to go I'm going to go LeMahieu.
That's correct. You have 1 more to go. And he's the second highest priced Yankee bat.
Dude, all right. So I don't think it's Stanton.
Nope.
It wasn't Voit, right?
Correct.
It's not going to be Torres?
Gleyber Torres. Well done. There it is. Way to pull it out.
I knew, I'll be honest, the only price, I had seen Stanton's price earlier at 45, so I knew he wasn't, which led me to believe that some of these guys, if Stanton's going to be that cheap, some of them are going to be a little bit more than they should be. So, yeah, that's a lot. So, if that's the case, I guess here's the odd thing though, you don't have to pay for pitching.
Right, you're right. If you're paying Rodriguez and
Gray, sure,
right,
but you could do Rodriguez. I mean, Sabathia or Matt, or even Pomerantz down there. I don't like. There's no one at the top I think Rodriguez would be the one guy where you really feel like you need to roster him. I don't think Gray is that at the price point. I think he's fine, but I don't think he's a necessity. And then you've got a bunch of mix and match guys down there in the low or the high 6, low 6, low 7K range. It's going to make. Let's try this before we go. How long in are we right now?
Oh, we're long enough in.
All right. I don't like to skimp people, even on a short slate. So, all right, let's do that. Give me a pitcher with Erod that's one of the cheap guys.
I would say Sabathia.
We'll go Sabathia. All right. So, let's try and 5-man Yankees. God, Sanchez is 56.
Right. I mean, that's you're gonna run into Sanchez and Judge crushing you here because they're going to be 2 or 3 or 4 in the lineup, right?
Yeah. So, okay, check this out.
What do you have left over? 2,900. If
I were to play Sanchez, Encarnacion, I'll get Torres out of there. I think that's egregious, or LeMahieu. Let me get both of them out, because if you play Torres, Encarnacion, Sanchez, LeMahieu, and Judge, you got nothing like you're
right.
toast. But if you threw Stanton in there and say Aaron Hicks, who is very reasonably priced, it's still tough. You still only have 3,300 remaining for the remaining 3 bats, second, third, and short. It's doable, but it's not particularly easy. I think unless there's decent value, maybe it's possible that we'll even see some like Pomerantz Sabathia pairings or Pomerantz Mats, because then it really opens it up and you can literally do whatever you want.
Yep, that makes a ton of sense. And I think you also have some pieces in this Cubs lineup. Kyle Schwarber being at 3,900 could make for some nice savings for some upside against Julio Teheran with the wind blowing at the right center field will make for a very popular option, I would assume, on Monday night. Find Dave over on Twitter at Lofty_D, LOUGHY_D. Find him Monday, Wednesday, Friday, writing the deep dive that is available behind the paywall, Awesemo.com. Become a member, use the promo code EARLYBIRD, 50% off your first month. We have the MLB Strategy Show, which is live on YouTube. It's Adam and Josh on days where Dave writes. Typically, there are some moving parts there. And then you get Adam writing the deep dive Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Dave filling in on the Strategy Show along with Emac and Jake and some other guys who help out and make for some very good viewing there. Then you get the deeper dive at 5 p.m. live before lock. After that, leading you up to lock, all the content you need, all free in front of the paywall. But projections, ownership projections, you get the lineup builder, you get the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, and all the articles, premium articles behind the paywall are worth the price of admission. Find me on Twitter at Dan Stratton, of course, Awesemo_com to find the website. And as always, like this podcast on iTunes, subscribe, leave a comment, a rating, do the same over on YouTube, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit that alarm bell to make sure you get a notification every time we post a new video or we go live with our live stream. With that said, we wish you the best of luck on Monday's slate. You'll hear from Adam and Emac Tuesday morning right here on the DFS Early Bird, presented by Awesemo.com.